Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Campfire Guide to Parenting. I'm your host, Mike McDonald. I'm president of Kid Venture and father of four. Last time we had a great conversation with Zach Matos about raising money smart kids. Today, we are totally shifting gears to something very close to my heart, our kids' emotional well-being. How do we raise kids who feel confident, connected, and able to handle sort of life's ups and downs, particularly in this crazy, oftentimes disconnected world? Well, to help with that, I am joined, thankfully today, by Taylor Blunsen. Taylor Blunsen is a licensed clinical social worker based in Houston, Texas. Taylor's experience spans behavioral health hospitals, schools, even Kid Venture Camp back in the day, and her own private practice, Memorial Village Counseling. She specializes in supporting teens and adults navigating anxiety, depression, relationship challenges. Taylor, thank you for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this one.
I'm super excited to be here. Obviously, very passionate about mental health, our emotional well-being, and of our kids too. And being a mom myself, I try to take what I do in the therapy room and bring it to my own family. And how can I help set my kids up for success and just be there with them to grow?
And that's really what this podcast is really all about. I love that you brought that up. We definitely want to hear from you with regards to your experience as a therapist, but we also want to make that relatable to our own families too as well. Thank you for reminding me that you are a mother of two, right? A 1 and a 4-year-old. Am I right about that?
Yeah, just turned 1 and just turned 4.
Well, I want to dive in because I know we got a lot to talk about. When I have conversations with other families, one of the first things that comes up is, how are your kids doing? I often find myself saying, well, you're doing well. And I want to talk about what doing well actually looks like. And not everybody really knows what doing well looks like for your kids. So talk about what you notice as a therapist, as a mom, when kids are really thriving. What does that look like? Like their curiosity, their humor, their ability to bounce back. Give us a sense of what doing well means.
I think a lot of times when we expect our kids to be doing well, it's maybe not experiencing any negative emotions, but that's not the case. Anger is a normal emotion, right? Sadness is a normal emotion. All of these things are normal emotions. So I think having a kid that's doing well is really being able to experience all of these different things, learning how to recognize that they're feeling sad or recognize that they're feeling happy, being able to learn to verbalize that. What does that mean? And I think if we have something negative that they're experiencing, how do we recognize that and then bounce back from that? Just like you said, being able to bounce back. Kids are so resilient. So I think learning the skills to help them navigate these different emotions, for me, that's what I think doing well looks like.
I think you bring up a really great point right off the bat. And it's that I think for a lot of parents, doing well means our kids are happy, right? They're cruising through life and they're making friends and they're dealing with things. But you're right, anger, the sadness, that's all a part of being a human being and being a kid, especially a younger child, right? And learning how to navigate those things. How do you talk to parents about that? And how do you ease their mind when it comes to your child is doing well because they are angry and because they are sad? Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think a lot of times when I'm talking to parents, it's just educating and just normalizing the conversation. Like, hey, we all have bad days, right? Everyone's entitled to a bad day, and that's okay. Maybe you have a bad moment. It doesn't have to change the entire day, right? We can still come back from that. So I think part of the conversation is really normalizing those things and even pointing out we have bad days or we have bad moments all the time. That's normal in your kids too, because it's normal for you. And like you said, that's just a part of the human experience.
That's absolutely true. I think this is me talking, not a therapist, right? Me being able to express my emotions appropriately in front of my child too also probably sets the tone for what they learn and how I model to them. Am I right about that?
Oh, for sure. Kids learn by modeling, right? That is a huge part of how they learn. It's so funny. There's so many things that I'm recognizing that I say to my own kids and they use it on me. And I'm like, oh, they're listening, right? I wasn't expecting you to come back and say that to me, but all right.
So, Taylor, having run summer camp for 31 years, we have some kids that seemingly are doing well, but they're quiet, right? They don't tend to express themselves. They're not the kind of kids that are going to be loud and boisterous and wear their emotions on their sleeve. Then you got some kids that are the complete opposite. You know exactly what's going on with that kid at every moment. Talk to me about the difference in that and what we should be looking for as parents when we have one child or the other.
I think it's really great to have that awareness and recognizing that your kids just handle things differently. They process things differently, and that's okay. They're the one who is a little more quiet and reserved. Maybe it's pulling them away from where everyone is gathered. Just have that one-on-one conversation with them. One thing we really want to try not to do, and I try to be very cognizant of this with my own kids, is not putting words in their mouth. Because especially with mine, she's 4, she doesn't always have words to verbalize what's going on, but really asking those open-ended questions and getting to know how is it that my kid is learning to communicate.
I think that's really important. You touched on something, I think, or maybe you alluded to it, but when you have more than one child, I think we as parents have a tendency to want to try to parent each of those children in a very similar fashion.
Mm-hmm.
But as we all know who have multiple children, right, every one of your kids is very different. And sometimes it takes a little bit different approach, right, with each of our kids. Can you talk a little bit about that and this sort of acceptance of understanding that each of your kids is very different no matter how you model at home?
I think as parents, a lot of times, maybe even unknowingly, we compare. Even mine is super young, right? So I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. I mentioned the 1-year-old, obviously, we're still figuring out because she's still a baby. She's still too little, right? But I think even in recognizing certain milestones that she hit versus her sister, we do a lot of comparison without even realizing it. So I think, like I said, really having that awareness and being mindful of, you say something, one of your kids responds differently. Even with my own kids, right? Like I said, the 1-year-old is still a baby, but just noticing some of those differences. She's already picking up on mirroring certain things, or she's very good at mimicking things already. My other daughter did some of that, but I feel like maybe because the baby is around an older sibling and maybe because there are some differences, like she's picking up on some of those things a lot faster. So it's like just trying to be aware of, okay, maybe she's a faster learner or she's learning a little bit differently in that sense.
Sure. Well, especially in my case, Taylor, I've got 4 kids. My oldest is 27. My youngest is 12. Then I've got a 25 and a 19-year-old. One of my children wears her heart on her sleeves. It doesn't take much for me to know or feel when she walks through the door that something is wrong. And I can engage her and I can sit down with her and I say, hey, what's going on? Let's talk. One of my other kids, I can feel that something's going on, but there's no way that he's going to really talk about it in that moment in time, right? You know what I mean? He's much more calculated, much more reserved to that. And I've got to be able to deploy, right, a little bit different parenting skills when it comes to trying to engage my kids on what's happening in their life and what's going on with them emotionally. And then what you said about your 1-year-old, when you have an only child, they've got 2 people modeling. When you have a 12-year-old and they have 3 older siblings, it's crazy to me the attributes that my 12-year-old has, distinctly unique, but very much like each of his other 3 siblings that are older than him, and his mother and father, by the way. So it's almost like in that situation, there's 5 parents in the house.
The biggest thing I feel like all of this is having awareness and being intentional, right? Yeah. So even like you said, recognizing the different things in your kids, even some of my neighbors' kids, they're more likely to talk about things when you meet them on their level and you play with them. So maybe they're not going to be that kid that's going to come sit with you and just like, hey, let's talk about it. But if you're playing with them and you're engaging with them on that level, they're more likely to just start sharing on their own a little bit.
Right. Which in reality for a lot of parents, including myself, can be hard to do because when it's a long day at work and you come home, you're not necessarily being intentional about trying to feel out your kids and their day too. That's why I think it's real important that we have these everyday family rituals, right? And for me, when I grew up, the non-negotiable in my house was dinner time. My mom made us all sit around the dinner table and eat a meal and talk. And it really was probably less about the food and more about what happened in your day and what's going on in your life. And it was a chance to just, like you said, be intentional, right? And talk to me a little bit about the rituals, those family rituals. Discuss small things that make a big difference, whether that's mealtime or chats or check-ins or walks, or what are some things that maybe you do or that you suggest to your families that they can do in order to plug into each other's emotions?
Yeah. No, I think that that's a great topic, right? And we're very big on, we sit down together for a meal and we talk about things. We don't have TV going on. We're not all sitting in different places. We sit around the table and we talk. And much going back to the modeling, my husband and I always talk about, how was your day? Right? Just the simple question, how was your day? And we just kind of share what our day was. Our 4-year-old has started asking us, oh, mommy, how was your day? Hey, Daddy, how was your day? So he's picking up on those things.
Sure.
And he loves to ask that now. And so it's, again, I think finding those simple moments to connect. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate or crazy, just those small moments to cause. So I love that you brought up your dinner piece because that's huge in my family. Another thing with both of my kids, actually, and it looks a little bit different, but like the whole bedtime routine. So like my oldest, we brush teeth, do all that good stuff. We go lay down, we read 2 books because we know kids like to talk their way out of bedtime sometimes. So we have a limit with books. And then we say our prayers and we kind of just like talk a little bit. What was your favorite thing about your day? Right. Yeah. So even just kind of phrasing those questions a little bit differently, because sometimes our kids are like, what did you learn in school today? I don't know. Nothing. I know that's not true, but if you can ask different questions to engage them, what was your favorite thing about your day? Or what was really hard for you today? Just asking them questions like that in those ways to engage them a little bit differently.
I know you know this, but what strikes me as really important about that is you're not just engaging your kid and you're not getting them to talk to you about their day, but you're also setting precedents for them to be able to engage themselves and other people with regards to their life and their emotions and what's going on in their world, right? You're sort of setting the stage for how they'll communicate in the future. That talking about things and engaging people about whether they're angry, whether they're happy, or they had a great day or whatever is okay. And I think that's probably one of those little things that you can do that has a big impact later on in life. Right?
I think that connection is really what's important. It doesn't even have to be what you're talking about, you said, but I think establishing that connection, because that translates into other ways, in different parts of their life with other people. Being able to connect is what's important.
Which seems to me to be really easy when they're 1 and 4. But what happens when they're 12 and 13, Taylor, and they don't want to have anything to do with you? Yeah. Or you ask them at the dinner table, so what did you do at school today? And they look at you and they go, nothing.
Right.
I mean, we all experience that at some point, right?
On a personal level, obviously, I'm not there yet because my kids are still excited to talk to me and want to do those things. What I encourage some of my parents to do, find out what your kid is interested in. If they're in that phase where they're not really invested in the family, they want to do their own thing, that is a normal part of growing up, right? Yeah. They stick to their friends. That's what they want to be doing. Sure. If you can find what they're interested in. I had someone who was super into video games. The dad was like, all right, I'm going to go sit with him and we're going to play some games one night. That's going to be our thing. And so that became a regular part of their routine. That's what they did together. And so that was his way of connecting. So again, you got to learn your kid a little bit, right? There's going to be challenges. I think that's normal, right? Because it's like I said, I think parenting is like a big learning experience too. But I think finding what your kids are interested in and meet them out on their level is what's important.
I feel like, Taylor, and I know I used the example of when I was a kid and the family dinner was non-negotiable. That was our time to sit down as a family. But I also felt like back then there weren't that many distractions to pull us away from the table in the first place. There wasn't an iPad and a phone in my hand. It seems to me there's a lot more distractions today that maybe would pull that family from having those small rituals and sitting around at the table and going on a walk and that kind of stuff. I would guess that this comes up quite a bit, right, in your practice. Talk to me about that interruption of family rituals by technology, for example, and screens, and how you move these families through trying to navigate all that.
So when it comes to younger kids, I think with some of this, because like you said, there are so many more distractions out there right now, right? Almost everyone has a phone, a tablet, all the things, right? With younger kids, I think, well, actually with any age, boundaries are important, right? So I think if you can establish healthy boundaries around technology, around usage of those devices from the start, that's huge, right? So teaching them what are healthy limits, what are all of those things, right? With younger kiddos, I think, right, typically when they are younger, we have a little more control over that because we can set those boundaries and say, like, it's not TV time right now. They can play with toys. You can play with, give them options, right, of what they can do instead. With the older kids, right, as you get into the teens and middle school and all of those ages, it can be a little more challenging, again, because all their friends are constantly on their phones. They're all on TikTok. They're all on all of these things. So again, I think if maybe some of it is working together, let's figure out a plan together, because it seems like you're not as engaging much with the family, and we're a part of the family. We want you to be here, right? We want you to be a part of this and experience all the things with us, but we're spending a lot of time on our phone. What does that look like? What would be a good compromise for us to work on together? Right. And I know parents, a lot of times they're like, I'm not letting my kid make the rules, right? And I hear you. But again, I think some of this is meeting them where they're at. Maybe let's try and make a plan together. Ultimately, you are the parent. You are going to have the final say, but how can you let them buy in a little bit? Maybe they're more likely to follow it if they have a little bit of say, because that's what teens love. They want some of that control back, right? That
issue is probably one of the most important hot button issues with our families at Kid Venture, right? Is that struggle between technology and personal time. A lot of older parents, I would probably classify as that, lived in a time where we didn't have that, right? Some of the younger parents have always had technology. We sort of moved into a generation now of parents that have always had that. I straddled that, right? And so in many ways, I think it was harder for me to accept, right? And to understand and meet my kids in the middle because I'd never had that experience as a child, right? But I think you bring up a really good point, right? In some ways that ship has sailed, right? Their friends meet up online. Their friends are digitally connected when our friends never were. And setting good boundaries where there's a healthy family partnership going on while still maintaining your child's desire to connect with their friends. That's a big issue today. And I know a lot of parents really struggle with, where is that line? At what point does my child get a cell phone? These are things that are talked a lot about at camp.
I also talk to the parents, what does your use on your cell phone look like? Right. And again, it goes back to modeling. Of course, they're going to want to be on their phone all the time because they're like, well, you're doing it. So that means I can do it too. Right. So we see that a lot too. So it's like having a little bit of self-reflection on, what does my use look like whenever I'm on my phone all the time? And again, modeling that. And I think the other part is you can incorporate, I was working with one family and they incorporated a weekly tech timeout. Right. So it was like one day a week or a certain time of the day, we're all going to turn our devices off and just like do something together as a family. Evaluating, was that difficult for all of us to do, or was that something that was easy and we start to enjoy it because we are unplugging for a little bit and we're all doing it together? It's not just an expectation of the teenager, but it's everybody, and just kind of seeing how that goes for them.
And I don't know, obviously, when I was a kid, I couldn't have a conversation. I could have a conversation with a friend on the phone, but typically we would go to somebody's house and they would come to my house, right? And that's how it did. That's how it worked. I think also encouraging your kids to have friends over to the house. We've always wanted our house to be like a cool place where they wanted to bring their friends over here. And we would make it fun, right? For a variety of reasons. But I think one of those main reasons was so that those kids could interact with one another and have real world relationships outside of just being on the phone texting each other or whatever platform, right? Mm-hmm. And we've always tried to do that. Of course, they get to a certain age where they don't want to have anything to do with mom and dad, right? And because they're too cool for school. And I get that part of it, right? But I don't know, do you see a lot of parents trying to have the kids over, creating the play dates and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that you're saying that with with the younger kids, yes. With the older kids, not as much.
Right.
And so in my personal life, I think we do that a lot because my husband went to a private school in Houston. Like it's a huge friend group, right? Like right. I feel like this is a very rare situation, but there's like 15 that are still very close knit friends, right? In this group, They all have kids now. They're all married now. So we make it a point to going to get our kids together, start having those play dates, and then they're building those friendships among themselves, which is great. Right. So with the younger kids, for sure, because I think the parents are also needing that time to make sure that they're staying connected with friends and giving them a playmate, right? Which is helpful in a lot of different ways. With the older kids, they are finding a lot of friends online, on these platforms, on Xbox Live, all of these things. And so they may not be establishing those relationships as well. Sure. I am saying that.
It's challenging. If you don't live in a neighborhood that has a culture where people come out into the street and hang out and neighbors talk to neighbors, which seems really rare today, then it's hard, right, to make those connections and get those people together. But gosh, if you have a situation like yours, right, where your neighbors are coming out, they're bringing out their kids, it isn't just you modeling, it's the whole community modeling. And that's got to be pretty powerful for a kid. They can almost instantly see the value of those kind of relationships as opposed to the ones that are met online, correct?
For sure. And it's funny, we have, for some reason, there was something in the water when I had my kids, because 2 houses down, they have kids the exact same ages, like very close to the same birthdays. The house in between us, exact same thing. So we've made very close relationships with our neighbors, and they're not even part of that group that I mentioned earlier, but we have a play date with them probably at least once or twice a week. And that's with their daughter. And it's funny, we're driving in the neighborhood now, we pass their house, and my daughter wants to roll the window down when she sees them outside. Hey, I just want to say hi, and just start a conversation, right? So she loves it. She loves building those connections and just talking. She'll talk your ear off, which I love. But I think she's already seeing the importance of that, like you mentioned, and building those relationships. So
you talked about intentionality a while ago, and I'm going to use a camp example here too. Kids come to camp. There's no phones at camp. They're not online at camp. They're very old school in that sense. And when the kids come home from camp, especially overnight camp, it's almost like it's about 2 days later, and I've got parents calling, trying to get their kid connected with that kid at camp because they want to continue that real world experience, right?
Mhm.
And I know kids love to be online, and I know they love to connect with their friends in a variety of different ways. But when they really realize the power of actually making friendships, going on an adventure and being at camp and doing all those things, they really want to continue that at home. And I think it's really intentional when a parent calls us up and says, hey, can you connect me with this family? Because my kid is really bugging me to get together and have a play date with this kid. So I think that makes sense. That can happen at camp and that can happen in your neighborhood, right? Just engaging somebody that you as a kid and say, hey, let's get our kids together.
Right, for sure.
So Taylor, I want to shift things a little bit right now. It seems like I'm going to go back prior to COVID. We were seeing a lot of increases in anxiety and clinical depression with our kids, even before COVID. I don't think COVID helped that, by the way. And it seems to be a really important issue in our country, right? This level of anxiety and uneasiness with our kids. What are some other factors that you think, sleep, diet, whatever it might be, that you think are affecting your kids' mood and their behavior? Is that something that you bring up when you're working with families and you're trying to work through all of these emotions and what's going on with their kids?
Yeah, absolutely. Doesn't matter if they're a kid, doesn't matter if they're an adult client, my friends, right? Whoever. A part of all of the regular questions whenever I first start talking to someone, especially who is a client, is how are they sleeping? How are they eating? Right? How are they functioning day to day? Because I think those things are so important, right? If you're not getting a good night's sleep, then your body's not able to recover. Your body's not able to re-energize. And same thing with food. Think about if you've ever been hangry, right? It happens, right? We need food to fuel our body to keep that regulation going. So I think all of those factors are super important because especially with kids, right? Your brain is not fully developed until you're around age 26. Right. So our kids got a lot of work to do, right? Not by any fault of them, but their brains need those things to continue healthy development, to get their, like I said, get their bodies to reset. All of those things are super important to helping them manage emotions and being in, like you said, having a healthy mood and just recognizing all of that.
It's almost like sleep, food, exercise, good nutrition. These are the big levers that we have some control over, right? As parents, right? And if we don't create that foundation for our kids, it's going to be pretty difficult, right? For them to be emotionally well, moving out in the world, especially dealing with the things that we don't have much control over.
Right. Again, I think a lot of that is modeled, right? So if we have good eating habits, we're giving them good food, right? They're going to be more inclined to eat that food and create those own healthy habits for themselves. Same with hydration, right? Drinking water, drinking healthy things, not too much juice or sugary drinks to make sure that they're putting nutrients into their body to help them recover and all of these things. Again, a lot of it is modeling. So are we modeling these healthy behaviors? Are we, you think, making sure we have, and it goes back to routine too, like sleep, making sure that, kids are getting adequate sleep and we are helping them establish those routines to wind down and to make sure that they're on the right path to establishing healthy sleep habits.
That's great. Thanks for that. I was actually going to make a joke about that because I've been told that my brain isn't fully developed yet. Yeah, sure. You mentioned that proper sleep and nutrition and exercise is important because the brain isn't fully developed until it's 26. I can tell you right now from personal experience, my wife has told me on several occasions that my brain is yet to be fully developed, and I'm a little over 26 right now.
It's important though, right?
Oh, no, it totally is important. Let's take the exercise for a moment, right? When you're a child, you have got to move your body. It's not just about getting out all that energy, but it's the way that a child connects with the world, right? It's how he experiences the world or she experiences the world, whether it's on a playground or a game of kickball or something else. Leading a sedentary life and sitting at home on a couch on an iPhone is not going to do what 4 million years of evolution has dictated needs to happen for a kid, right? So we've got to find opportunities for our kids to be active, right?
Yes.
And I know you know that, and I know I'm sort of preaching to the choir here on that one. But I will say this, and I'll use this to segue. I think we can also overschedule and overdo things for our kids in such a way that works negatively for them from an emotional and a social standpoint, right? And we see this overscheduling of kids' activities and not giving the opportunity to just be a kid and make decisions for themselves or have free play, whatever you want to call it. I want to kind of shift right here and talk about that, because I know you probably see that with some of your families, right? Talk to me about this sort of overscheduling of our kids and what kind of impact does that make on them?
I think I see that in some of the families with the kids. And then also as I started seeing adult clients, like same things were transitioning into adulthood, right? They just were constantly stacking their schedules, right? And so when it starts out in childhood, right? I think maybe some kids can handle it a little bit better than others, but I think a lot of times, I think from a parent perspective, what you're trying to do is like, I want to keep my kid active and engaged. I want to see what they're interested in. So it's like, we're just trying all of these things, but sometimes our kids do get overwhelmed and overloaded, and they may not always know how to say that. So I think that if you're seeing certain things like kids getting a little more irritable, or they're being a little more tearful, or certain things that are kind of the norm for them, then it's like, let's go back and let's check in, right? Are we overtired? Are we overextending? What does that look like? Do we need to take a break?
Do you think that this overscheduling of kids' lives stems from just our own ability or inability to create times where we can just chill out? Or do you think as a parent, we're worried, right, that our kid's not going to achieve or our kid's not going to do well? And so we put all these different things on their schedule because it almost stems from a fear as a parent. Talk to me a little bit about that. Where does that come from?
I think it could be a little bit of both, right? I think every situation is different, and people have different reasons for putting their kids in different activities. So I think with the fear piece, I think most parents will say that we want our kids to be successful. Like you said in the beginning, we want our kids to be happy. We want them to learn and to grow. And we're trying to help them be a good human, right? Like ultimately, that's what we want for our kids. I think one thing to keep in mind though is one, are we think maybe self-reflect a little bit. Are we doing this for ourselves, or are we doing this for our kid? And if you start seeing that they're in football, right, or whatever it is, and they're not as engaged, maybe don't like it as much, you try it out for a year, give yourself a timeline. We're going to try this for 1 season, maybe 2 seasons, see how it goes. If they're still not interested, then why are we pushing it? Are we pushing it because we really want them to get into football, or what's the reasoning behind it?
Great points. All right. So Taylor, one of the things that's on my mind a lot with regard to raising kids, right, is this nervousness and anxiety and tension that our world seems to just permeate almost all the time, right? And while I think it's great not to just sit down and have your kids watch the nightly news with you, because I don't think that's a great thing to do, it's hard to keep a lot of this anxiety and this tension off of the shoulders of our kids, right? Because I think we as parents and as adults, we sort of carry that, right? And I think that probably manifests itself sometimes in our parenting, right? Share with us how kids today absorb this heavy news. And I know they're vibing on this stuff today. I see it in my own kids, right? They're sharing these worries that maybe are adult worries that they shouldn't carry. And how do we pull the burden off of our kids, this anxiety and worry that we're all feeling right now? And how do we give them the opportunity to lighten their load and feel like the world is a great place as well?
Great question. And I think, right, it varies a little bit by age, because younger kids are maybe not as aware, right, as our kids are getting older. And, if they are on social media and they're seeing things that are posted by other people, or kids are talking about it at school, there's a lot of ways that information gets shared. And maybe it's not always the most accurate information. So I think depending on the age of your kid, I think one, kind of normalizing, again, much like I said in the very beginning of this, when you have negative emotions are a normal thing. Right? Our world can be really happy and have all these really great things that are happening in our lives. But at the same time, there are some hard moments, right? There are things that happen. And so I think, again, normalizing like that is a part of it. But at the same time, reassuring it's not something that they're having to face alone, right? I think we really, as parents, try to reemphasize we're keeping them safe, right? We're in a safe space. Our house is safe. I'm taking care of you. But if you do feel worried or you do feel upset by it, let's talk about that, right? Let's have the conversation. What is it that you're worried about? And how do we make you feel grounded or make you feel a little bit better?
Maybe this goes back to what's age appropriate, but where's the line? Where's the balance between, as a parent, protecting our kids' emotional stability and being vulnerable as an adult and just admitting, I am scared, I am worried, right? These things do get me down. How do you balance that as a parent to try to teach your kid to express their emotions, but also keep them emotionally stable?
Right. That is a great question. I think for a lot of us, we do want to just protect our kids. So it's hard to say if there's like exact balance, right? Or how to best do that. I think some of it is going to be depending on what the situation is, and just, I don't know, maybe recognizing how it's making you feel as the parent when you're learning about that, and two, kind of, is it something that your kid is bringing up to you, right? Because you want to navigate that a little bit and help them understand. But I think, again, depending on the age, you don't want to go too much into it, right? I would never tell my 4-year-old some really heavy thing that I saw in the news. So there is, we are protecting them in some way from some of that.
It is for sure. Yeah, Taylor, you brought something up a second ago that made me think about something, right? And I think in the moment, every generation feels like they have this moment where things are maybe falling apart, right? And right now it might feel like, oh gosh, things are really crazy right now, and there's a lot of anxiety and stress and so forth. But it wasn't that long ago we were worried about the Cold War. And before that, in the 40s, it was World War II. I mean, generation, right? Every set of parents and children, no matter whether that was in the 40s or the 50s or the 60s or the 2025s now, has sort of deal with anxiety and stress and worry about their livelihood at times, right? But we've also made it, right? And we've created very happy, productive people, right? And gotten through that and grit, and with normalizing some of these things, right? Once again, talk about, as a family today, like families have done every generation, how do we conduct ourselves as parents, and how do we create a family that sort of through these things and becomes happy, healthy adults later on in life?
You're going to hear me say this a lot throughout this entire thing. Modeling is huge, right?
Yeah.
So I think if your kid is bringing something up to you that they're concerned about or they're worried, whether it's, world in their school, in their own little world, whatever it is, right? You want to be able to have that conversation with them, open it up, hear what their worry is, hear what they have to say, right? And again, I think it's coming back to, okay, I hear you, and I think that's a real worry, and you're totally normal to feel that way and feel worried. But at the same time, shifting that focus to, but have a lot of great things happening for us now, and kind of on what those positives are, and maybe that's a moment to reflect on some gratitude and things that you are grateful for, and what you have going on in y'all's lives, and creating that. I think it's, again, a lot of modeling and a lot of normalizing, because much like you said, anxiety and stress, it's not a new thing. We're just talking about it more.
We just have a lot of therapists now who help us work through all of this now.
Yes, and I'm one of them. Happy to do it.
Right, exactly. You bring up a great topic, which is really important in my house, and it's called gratitude, right? And I know it's important, and sometimes somebody has to knock me upside the head, and it's usually my wife, and she'll say something like, "What are you really thankful for right now, Mike?" I know that things seem like they're going awry, but think of all the things that aren't, right? And how blessed that we really are. And I think teaching kids a chance to stop and reflect, one of the cornerstones of Kid Venture, right? We call it reflection, is to think about that moment in time, to be in the moment and to be present, right? Can't do anything about the past, and the future hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So just sort of in that moment and teaching kids that, I think, is an essential tool.
Right. And a lot of my clients and even family members, anxiety stems on the what ifs or things that have happened in the past or worries about the future. So I think gratitude is such a huge piece of being able to work through that, because you're grounding yourself in that moment and focusing on the present.
Yeah, great point. Anxiety is typically not about the here and now. It's about what hasn't happened or what happened before that I can't change anymore, right? I know this probably never happens in your house, and it's probably happened in my house, maybe somebody has a meltdown, somebody boils over, their emotions get to the point where, sort of control in a sense, right? And walk us through as parents, right? We as a parent diffuse the situation, work with our child to get them back in a calmer state, and work through those emotions that they sort of control with.
Yeah, never happened in my house, ever. No, I'm kidding. They happen all the time. I have a 4-year-old, right?
Oh yeah, and I think I talked to you about this one time. It's like handle like kids in a 10-week period over the course of summer. I come home to 4 and I'm blown up.
It could be because you peeled the banana the wrong way, because you peeled the banana at all. You picked the wrong color plate. Literally anything can trigger a meltdown, especially in young kids, right? I have this visual that I use, right? So think of this as the human brain, right? This is your prefrontal cortex, which is the front part, the last part to develop. This, your thumb, is the midbrain, which is emotion centered, right?
Okay.
And so when kids are upset, or adults, humans for that matter, when we're upset, right, we flip our lid. We're not thinking with our prefrontal cortex. We're thinking out of our amygdala. We're thinking out of that emotion central. So in order to have a conversation, to get them to come down at all, you have to re-engage that part of their brain. So
Right.
the different calming strategies and things that you can do that I do with my own kids, even one huge thing for my daughter is blowing out the candles, right? Because we're in a phase of huge emotions right now. Three-nager was a thing. I don't even know what they call four, but we're there, right? So blowing out the candles, I hold up my hand and she has to blow every single candle out. So we practice taking deep breaths, right? And she loves doing it now. It's
That's
become a
great.
regular thing. Okay,
Yeah.
see that you're upset. Let's blow out the candles. Do you want to blow out my candles or do you want to blow out your candles? And she'll choose, right? And so it becomes a regular part. So doing things like that, breathing is another one that I think I share with every single person that I talk with, their client or friend or family member, whatever. Square has four sides. Breathe in for 4, you hold that for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. And you do it 4 times. So try to do ones that are like easy to remember. I think all of these things, modeling and helping them learn these calming strategies are huge.
Yeah.
I think what I encourage my families to do is, their kid is really upset, no matter what age, but especially in the teen years. Okay, again, setting the boundary of go take, 10 minutes to calm down a little bit. You can go to your room, whatever it is that it looks like, and then we're going to come back and talk about it. Right.
Yeah.
So it's always coming back to it is what the key is. So give them their space. That's fine. If that's what's going to work for them, give them a little bit of time, but we always come back and talk about it.
Right. And do you think that parents just get worn out, especially at that age, and they don't come back to it? Because it takes discipline, right? Have a teenager to come back and to make sure that you're following up with that child, right? And I think maybe a lot of parents just get worn out.
I think a lot of parents are quick to take things away, right? Something happens, whatever, that's the first thing. All right, well, you don't get to do this, or we're not doing this, and give me your phone, right? Sometimes that might work for your kid, right? But at the same time, if you're never having a conversation about it, then you're not fully understanding why that's even happening.
Right. And I think in the long term, it's really creating an opportunity for that child to express their emotions, to find resolution to whatever's going on in their life too, as well.
Exactly. Right. Again, like I think doing those things, and again, I'm going to say modeling. Be aware of how you respond and how you react towards them, because a lot of times kids are going to mirror that. If you come in hot-headed and you're yelling, either going to mirror it or they're going to shut down. And they're going to say, well, I can't go to my dad for anything, or I can't go to my mom for anything, because they're just going to be reactive, right? They're just going to yell at me. They're just going to do X, Y, Z. So it takes a lot of self-discipline and a lot of self-awareness to kind of, okay, I need the timeout. So I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to come back and then we're going to talk about it. So you likely need it on both ends, not just on the kid end, right?
So what about kids that just don't talk, right? And almost the opposite of what we've just been discussing with regards to a meltdown. How about those kids that are sort of internally and they express that, whatever that meltdown is, by just closing up, right? And not talking. What approach do we take as parents when we have a kid like that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that you can try. I think one is kind of going back to what I said earlier of meet that kid where they're at. They're shutting down and you're just probing question after. It's not going to feel like a space where they can open up and talk to you about things.
Right.
Maybe sometimes that's just going in their room and sitting in silence with them. Right. A lot of people are so uncomfortable with silence, but it can also be like a very powerful tool.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And I would say also, you're just really struggling as a parent, then maybe that's when you look to, okay, I get outside help, because therapy doesn't always have to be that there's like a major, you're in, but sometimes they just don't want to listen to their parents. Right. And sometimes that's what we're for, is we could be saying the same message that a parent is saying, but it sounds totally different coming from an outside person rather than coming from your parent.
And there have been times personally for myself where I don't really want to talk about it at that moment in time, but it always makes me feel good when someone says, when you're ready to talk, I feel like my mom's talking to me right now. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here for you. And there's something about that makes me just kind of be at peace a little bit, right? To have that reassurance, right? And I think that's a very tiny thing you can do for your kid, but a very powerful one. let them come to you on their terms too as well. Don't force the issue, right?
Exactly.
Don't force them to want to talk when they don't want to talk. It's not going to be productive. It's not going to be rewarding for you or for them at the end of the day, I don't believe, you know?
I 100% agree. And I think that's a way to respect the boundary, right? And you're showing respect for them as well of, okay, I'm going to push you to talk about it if you're not ready, because like you said, it's not going to be productive. So I'm going to give you that space, and also reassuring them and letting them know, okay, you are ready. Like, talk about that.
I think parents today are way more open to seeking out someone like yourself and going to therapy and involving their kids and themselves. I feel like when I grew up, that was just not a thing that very many people did. I'm really happy that that's the case. How can parents know when it's time to get support? I mean, is there a bell that rings in the parent's head that says, we got to go see somebody here? Or what are the signs? Help listeners here understand when's a good time to seek some help.
Yeah. I think there's a couple different ways. Like I just said, right? It doesn't always have to be when there's a crisis, right? Therapy doesn't always have to be whenever there's something negative happening in their life. It can also just be an outlet to talk about things, help a kid create that emotional regulation. It doesn't have to always be, okay, we're going through a really hard moment. We're going through a divorce. We're going through XYZ. They need to talk to somebody, work through this specific crisis. It doesn't always have to be that. And so I think normalizing that again, that it's just a tool that is just an extra layer of support.
Do you feel like people think of therapy now today also as a way to improve their situation? Maybe they don't necessarily feel like things are broken, but it's almost like working out, right? You want to just become better at communicating. You want to become better at learning how to handle emotions.
I think that's what a lot of us try to emphasize, is that much like working out, it helps you improve and we want you to be the best version of yourself. Right. So how can we help you get there? And how can we, sometimes with clients, it gets to like me, right? So it's like, all right, you're there, but like, I'm just here to check in every now and then. All right, how are things going? Are you keeping up with your self-care? Are you doing this? Right. So kind of helping them continue to grow in that way. Right.
Yeah. One of the most important endeavors in life is being a parent, and yet it comes with no roadmap, right? Other than essentially your parents, right? And so surrounding yourself with some kind of support, whether that's a therapist or whether that's friends and family or whatever, and it takes a village, I think is really essential in trying to create, a happy, healthy family unit, right? And I'm pleased to say I see more and more people seeking out help and seeking out support and not being ashamed of that, by the way.
Describe my life right now as beautiful chaos, right? Because it is a little chaotic at times. Let's be honest, most of the time, right? With two littles. But there's so many beautiful moments within that to have that gratitude and to express, love and everything that we're experiencing. Being a parent is the most rewarding and the most difficult job I've ever had in my entire life. But I wouldn't change a thing. There's definitely no manual for it. That would be nice.
Taylor, we've talked a lot about a lot of topics today about parenting and with younger children and older children, and anxiety today and meltdowns and modeling. It's one of the biggest takeaways for me for our discussion today. So thank you so much for that. It reminds me of the importance that it begins with me. Share with listeners what gives you hope about today's kids, given everything that's going on, and what gives you hope for this generation of kids as we move forward?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, but kids are so resilient, right? And I think just even thinking back to the basics of they're just kids. Most of the time, they just want to have fun. They want to explore. They want to do all of these things that we used to love doing when we were kids. And I think just reminding ourselves that they are kids, start to load their schedules, or we start to have our own worries about the world and what they're doing. Most of the time, they're not thinking about those things, right? And remembering what it was for us when we were kids. It's, the connections that we're building, all of those memories, right? So I think, makes me hopeful of, and I have to remind myself too, that, it's not thinking about all the little details that I am or that I'm worrying about.
Feel very fortunate, and I know you do too, because this is very similar to your experience, is that we get a chance to engage with kids on a regular basis through our job, right? And after 31 years of helping foster summer camp programs for kids, I am amazed by the resiliency of kids, the creativity of kids, and the promise for tomorrow based on their experience when I see them at camp. And it really, it changes my perspective. I think if I went through life without engaging kids through my work, I would have a different sort of view about the world, right? And I'm really thankful for that opportunity. And I know you are too, right? I meet kids on a regular basis, right? And then it helps form your opinion about the world. So talk to me today a little bit about that experience for you and what gives you, does that change how you act as a parent and how you view the world because your work involves kids?
Yeah. Like you said, it does change my perspective of things. And it reminds me that I don't have to worry about the little things, right?
Yeah.
Or stress over the little things.
Right.
Just really being mindful of that, like, especially, one who plans the birthdays and like all of the things, right? And so I'm thinking about all these little details and all the things like, oh, this has to happen. And my kid doesn't care about any of that, right?
Yeah.
What she cares about is the connection. What she cares about is it's the simple things, right? Kids aren't, like I said, kids aren't thinking about all of these things that we might be taking on or worrying about. And I think that just reminds me to be present in the moment, like we talked about, mindful of that and not worrying about what needs to happen or what will happen or what has happened already, but where we're at in that moment and just like sat in, right? Because that's where kids are. They're not thinking about all of those other things. They're with you in that moment. And so just like we need to that and really focus on that and huge.
I think given everything that's going on, I feel like the future is really strong for our kids, right? You know what I mean? And I think as parents, we worry and we muck things up because we don't model very well. But at the end of the day, if I look at my own kids, I'm so darn proud of each one of them and what they've accomplished thus far in their life. And just being a parent, like you said earlier, is one of the hardest things, but it is the most rewarding thing in the world. So anyway, really appreciate you being on today, by the way. Thank you so much. I know that you opened my eyes and provided me with a lot to think about, and I hope you did, and I feel certain you probably did with our viewers. So thank you so much for joining me, Taylor, today. It was just a meaningful conversation. I think every parent listening can walk away with something practical to try, whether it's a small ritual or a better bedtime routine or just a reminder to slow down and be mindful and have a little bit of gratitude in life. I wanted to reach out to you, Taylor, with any questions, or maybe they were thinking about maybe trying to see you. Is there a place you can direct them to and can contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. My practice is called Memorial Village Counseling. My website, memorialvillagecounseling.net. My email address is taylor@memorialvillagecounseling.net. So we'll welcome any questions, anything anyone needs, that feel free to reach out. So
it's great. Really appreciate you. Taylor, thank you so much. You're amazing. It's great to see you again. Good luck with that 1-year-old and the 4-year-old. And hopefully we'll get to see each other soon. All right.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
In case you missed it, our last episode was with financial planner Zach Matos, and we talked about raising money smart kids. Together with today's conversation, it's part of what we're trying to do with this Campfire Guide to Parenting. Give parents real, useful tools for raising kids who are confident, they're compassionate, and prepared for life. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Mike McDonald, and we will see you next time.